We're very happy to be here tonight. We just wanted to say that, in case you're wondering why we're issuing our presentation to you from Southern California, it's because these bills are statewide and all of us are affected. So what happens to you happens to us, and what happens to us happens to you. So we started a United Neighbors Coalition in hopes of getting people together so they understand what's going on, and together we might be able to be a voice that is heard. And our ultimate goal is to be a voice at the table. So the bills are being amended as they're going through these committees. SB 9 has been amended, but we'll show you some of these. We've changed our presentation to indicate some of those changes so you're up to date. And basically, we're concerned that it sounds like our legislators are no longer really representing us. They seem to have groups that they answer to, and those groups have money interests in what happens and not particularly interested in what happens to all of us. And affordable housing is a very difficult issue that we have to have time to figure out, but adding more housing is not going to make that housing affordable. So with that, I think we're just going to get right into it and explain to you what's going on. Our thoughts have always been that any housing bill that leaves the state Senate or House has to pass a litmus test. And we should be asking these bills, are they adding any affordable housing? Are they protecting us and our environment by maintaining CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act? And are we addressing infrastructure upkeep? Because removing any of these items is a benefit to speculators who find these items costly to mitigate.
To analyze these bills, first of all, I'm an architect, so I have to draw. So Maria and I looked at drawing out these bills and using a typical California lot, about 7,500 square feet. And then we use Los Angeles ordinances. Okay, so in Los Angeles, you have a floor area ratio like you have in San Francisco, but here is only 0.45. So on this lot, you can see on the left-hand side, the white area is your buildable area. We have a front yard setback, side yard 5-foot setback, and a 15-foot rear yard setback. But this is a typical house on a lot on the right-hand side. And it's about 2,700 square feet. And you can see there's a much larger front yard than the allowable setback and much larger rear yard than the allowable setback. But this is a typical house in California. Okay, now, law currently allows an ADU, auxiliary dwelling unit, and a junior ADU on every lot. Again, in Los Angeles, based on your allowable square footage, you can then add these to your single family home, and now you have 3 units where 1 unit used to be.
You still have to respect the underlying zoning, but the ADUs allow homeowners a chance to augment their income with small rental units.
Now, when SB 9 comes into play, you lose all local zoning. SB 9 sets a 4-foot side yard and a 4-foot rear yard. And so now your buildable area is this big white rectangle. You maintain the front yard setback and you maintain your height. But so it also allows the duplex ADU and a junior ADU. So if you look at this diagram on the right, we took our house that was about 2,700 square feet. We've cut off 1 wall, which you're allowed to do in SB 9. And we've added 2 2-story duplexes, a junior ADU and an ADU. And we've built out to the perimeter of our setbacks. And now we have 4 units or 7,100 square feet where 1 house of 2,700 square feet used to be.
Now, SB 9 has been amended. So instead of, when our next slide, we're going to show you, well, maybe I'm ahead of myself here, so I won't go. But let me just say one other thing. We're going to now compare some of your San Francisco neighborhoods, and we've picked the Sunset District because my uncle used to live in the Sunset District. So he lived there for 50 years, and so we're using his house as an example of what this looks like in one of your areas.
So this is Sunset District. This is in yellow, our kind of case study site. And if you look down from above, this aerial photograph is basically how we're going to do all our studies for our San Francisco case. I want to thank San Francisco architect Tom Soper for assisting us and helping guide us through your zoning. So on this lot, which is 2,500 square feet, you're allowed currently 4,500 square feet of buildable. You have a rear yard setback is the only setback you have, and it is 25% of your lot, a minimum of 15 feet. So that looks like this. And you can see where it's white, you're allowed to build all the way out there, but back in the 50s when these houses were built, they all kept back, way back from what you're allowed to build to. This is a 1,300 square foot house, basically, where you're allowed to put 4,500 square feet and 4 stories.
Well, you can do that currently. So my uncle's house, which is only 1,300 square feet, could be a whole lot bigger without changing one bit of the law.
Okay, so now you are allowed an ADU. So this shows what you're allowed today, an ADU in 4,500 square feet, and your required setback. Now, when SB 9 comes into play, you have only a 4-foot setback. So look at the setback change. That's it. So now that eliminates all local zoning. CEQA, California Environmental Qualities Act, is no longer in play. And you're allowed to split a lot with SB 9. Now, this is where Maria's about to talk about the amendment. What was amended in SB 9 is that you can split them into 2 lots. They used to have to be equal in size. Now they can be 40-60 split. They don't have to be equal, but no one can be less than 40% of the original lot size. So here,
we're back in Los Angeles.
Right, so here's our 7,500 square foot lot split in half, and the white area shows where you can build. You're allowed to put 2 duplexes on each property in SB 9. Okay, so here you have about 4,000 square feet of housing and 4 units where 1 house used to be. So here we're back to San Francisco. And this is our lot in the Sunset District. We split it in half. We have the 4-foot setback. And now we can put 2 duplexes on each lot. In the back, we stacked duplexes. Each one is 2,700 square feet. In the front, we stacked them, and each one is 1,700 square feet because we left an access for a driveway to the back lot. So you have now 4 units, or about almost 9,000 square feet, replacing a 1,300 square foot house. You can also split the lot the long way. You can split it on a diagonal, you can do a curve. It doesn't matter as long as one is 40%, one 60%.
We actually have relatives in New York City that have a condo that is like this, very long, narrow,
and very livable. But so here we put kind of checkerboarded the duplexes. There are 4 duplexes, 2,700 square feet each. So now you can have, with SB 9, 4 units totaling 10,800 square feet, where 1 house, 1,300 square foot house used to be. Now, it doesn't have to be a duplex, and you don't have to rent anything. It can have to be 2 units. I mean, the bill says you have to have 2 units. Doesn't define the size of the unit. So 2 units, so you have a 500 square foot ADU, and then for 4 stories above this thing, you have yourself your single family house. And if you have 10,000 square feet on this property, replacing a 1,300 square foot house. In Los Angeles, this is what we call mansionization, and we have ordinances against that. But again, there's no affordability. You can't, when you look at land price and construction prices, none of this could possibly be affordable. And there's no affordability mandated. So if you were to look at a simple duplex bill, on this site right now where there stands a 1,300 square foot house, you could put a duplex that respects all the current underlying zoning, and you have each house would be 2,200 square feet. Quite impressive density that you're already allowed in San Francisco. Now, SB 10 allows a 10-unit apartment building on every single family lot in San Francisco. So we think that still requires your existing setbacks, but we're not sure. But again, no affordable units are required. So we did diagrams that wanted to look at SB 10 and how it impacts our communities. That would be in every place except for San Francisco's density. And so we're looking at this right now, and SB 10 talks about local control, don't count on that. But SB 10 also removes locally voted initiatives, which often protect open space. This is a very evil component of SB 10, besides putting the 10 unit apartment houses. And you might ask, why would somebody want to build 10 unit apartment houses in a single family zone? Well, in a commercial zone, typically you have to face entitlement costs. You have parking that has to meet existing zoning, and you have infrastructure repair. If you go into a single family neighborhood with SB 10, these are by right. So there's no entitlement, minimal amount of parking, and no infrastructure repair.
So a person, a developer that wanted to do 30 units on a commercial corridor would find it much more beneficial to get 3 lots and put 10 units on each of them and not face any of the requirements on a commercial zone.
It's faster and cheaper.
So far we've had no affordable housing. And on SB 9, Scott Wiener was quoted as saying, it's a duplex. You don't put subsidized affordable housing in a duplex. It doesn't pencil out. You have to have a certain scale of density for affordable housing. So our question is, why are we adding density here that has not the density required for affordable and not do it someplace else that does?
So how does it impact our neighborhood? This is the same area we're looking at. This is the site that we've been using as our case study. So this is the block or part of the block. And so you can come in and a developer can take that house and put an SB 9 development on it. The same developer can buy another property, but by the law of SB 9, you're not allowed to put, if you subdivide one lot, you can't subdivide the lot next to it, immediately adjacent to it. So you go one lot over, you buy that, you subdivide it. You can subdivide another one, again, not adjacent, but other developers can come in and buy the adjacent lots and subdivide or develop those as an SB 9 development. And then you can come in and do your SB 10 developments. How about parking? Where's parking now? Minimal parking. So you have to have a lot of on-street parking. But if you look at all these sites, you have a lot of curb cuts. I don't know what's left to park a car.
So California declares itself a leader in environmental stewardship, and yet they removed the CEQA review, which prevents piecemealing.
Okay, so as an architect, we have to go through environmental review all the time. We do a lot of master planning. If you're master planning a school and they want to build 2 buildings, you still have to look at the total campus and what they might want to do for the next 20 to 50 years, which could encompass another 5, 6, 7, 8 buildings. And so you do that, and that all gets reviewed at the same time. So when you do an environmental review, you have to look at the total impact as if everything's going to happen at once. So here we have in SB 9 and SB 10, they have done away with any kind of environmental review. They are going to rezone the entire state of California, subdividing every single family lot in California, and then not doing any kind of environmental review. That is piecemealing at its worst. So we're back to looking at the impact on our neighborhoods. And as Maria's talking about environmental concerns, in Los Angeles, USC did a study, and 80% of Los Angeles's trees are on single family lots. You can see backyard and front yard, lots of planting.
So this is what SB 9, no CEQA review will do away with. We'll have no review of the loss of trees and permeable surfaces that will happen in our backyards.
So what you will have is a 4-foot side yard and a 4-foot rear yard. This is a 4-foot rear yard or a 4-foot side yard. This is it. There's no room for trees, no room for permeable surfaces.
And this is a wheelchair access. This is wide enough for wheelchair access.
That's what defined the 4 feet. So let's come back and look at our typical San Francisco block. You have that current open space behind everybody. This is what happens if you were to do an environmental review and everybody built out everything at once. See the green, this green area? That would be your open space. That's it. Okay, no protection, no trees left, no permeable surfaces. How do you even fight a fire in something like that?
Now, what we want to show you here is San Clemente has already become this. They started out as single-family neighborhoods, but when the developer went bankrupt, the bank sold out lots and decided to take away zoning. So you can see one house there that has a backyard. Everything has been built out.
So this is just like that diagram we just showed you. This is that 4-foot separation. You can see where all the trees have gone. So the heat island effect will devastate our environment forever.
And for really a state that understands global warming, climate change, how do we not be concerned about this?
Back to our litmus test. Affordable housing, no. Environmental protection, no.
Infrastructure impact, someone needs to take responsibility for infrastructure.
So if you look at our diagram, here's the build out of that block. Our streets, which were built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, have water mains, sewer mains in them, gas lines in them. And here you have all this new demand on these lines, and there's no infrastructure improvements required at all. So what we had was 17 households here. There are now 71 in this diagram, 17 to 71, and nobody has to up the size of the water mains or sewer lines.
So developers are being given an out on this. Now, what happens when lines break? We have flooding, like we have often here in LA, but sometimes
this is fresh water.
Sometimes it's sewer water, and this is an example of Waikiki Beach that didn't want to spend money to improve their infrastructure, so developers started building high-rise hotels with no improvements. And 20 years ago, the sewer line broke, caused them to have to airlift guests out of hotels. Residents sued the city, and millions of dollars later and months later, the city had to improve all of their infrastructure.
Okay, so with 9 and 10, all local control is lost and no communities are exempted. Not beach communities, canyon communities, estate communities, gated communities, hillsides, typical communities. When we have these things, you always have somebody who says, yeah, but we have CC&Rs. They're not protected either.
And sometimes they try to carve out hillsides because they're high fire risks. But we want to note that California is becoming hotter and drier, and we can't ignore any area. Santa Rosa is a good example of an area listed as low fire risk that became a fire victim. Imagine the greater loss of life and property if more density had been allowed. Blocked exit routes and closer proximity of housing would have added to this nightmare scenario.
Okay, back to our litmus test. Affordable housing, no. These bills have no secret or environmental protection, and both SB 9 and SB 10 do not demand our infrastructure being improved.
So why are we doing this? Who's being helped? The ability to add density attracts land speculators, and land becomes an asset class. Land speculation is a global business. This is a brochure taken from a huge land speculation company, and this is a photo of the San Fernando Valley where we live. Speculators understand the huge profits they reap by doubling the land they own. And after the recession of 2008, a lot of single-family homes were bought by speculators and are being held as single-family residents. But when we have a law like SB 9 or a bill like SB 9 and 10 pass, these will become huge asset classes for them because now they can split all of these lots. In the Wall Street Journal, there was an article that stated, yield-chasing investors are snapping up single-family houses to rent. They're competing for houses with ordinary people who are armed with the cheapest mortgage financing ever. You now have permanent capital competing with a young couple trying to buy a house. And in Los Angeles, this is a UCLA report, Los Angeles is increasingly a city that is owned not by people, but by corporate entities of all kinds. Nearly 67% of all residential units in the city are directly owned by investment entities. So we believe these bills really help banks, real estate interests, developers, tax assessors, and legislators, not the people impacted by an economy that shuts them out of neighborhoods where they live and work because there is no affordable housing.
Now, there are a lot of other bad bills, and please pay attention to SB 478, but we're going to look at some positive steps forward. Right, there is a very good bill being proposed. That's SB 15. SB 15 looks at a big box retail that is no longer in business, shopping centers that have gone under, and they allow local government to decide to rezone those properties, and the state will grant to local jurisdictions up to 7 years of tax revenues. SB 15 also mandates affordable housing and prevailing wages, so those who work on these buildings can actually afford to live there. Okay, so in red is the area where the department store and all these retail areas are out of business. This has been out of business for a long time, and this is a huge piece of property. This is our little community behind, and as Maria said, why would you do this when you don't have the economy of scale? When you look at this yellow area, now you have economy of scale to do something really good. And SB 15 mandates affordability, is environmentally friendly, prevailing wage is there, infrastructure improvements are required, local zoning, including design review, are part of the law. They're required, CEQA has to be obeyed. You can do great projects here, and it's all doing it for the right reasons, the right way. Our United Neighbors Vision Committee has identified other ways to address affordability. This happens to be a metro parking lot, one of our mass transit parking lots in Los Angeles, and it's one of many that are used to store new cars. There's no demand for parking the cars for the commuters. And if you look on the other side of the fence, you'll see a tent encampment, and you look over the fence, you see all new BMWs over there, and then come back to the view. Government agencies have to be part of the solution. Okay, there's miles of this stuff. We're suggesting you park for the need of the commuters, you park for the housing above, but you get the land cost taken out of this in a public-private venture. This has been done before. And then you can have mixed income housing here. You don't want just affordable housing because you don't want to start getting projects. So this is a very doable concept that we'd like to see happen. We also want to incentivize the development of underutilized commercial corridors. This is not in San Francisco, but it's all around San Francisco. It's all around our state. It's all around our country, really. These miles and miles of just strip malls, that this is where you can address economies of scale.
So the state has smaller communities that could become work hub centers. Why does everything have to be in our metro centers? We should encourage jobs to go into smaller communities where housing could be more affordable, and we can link these communities with high-speed rail. So how can our legislators upzone the entire state of California and require no infrastructure upgrades, add not one unit of affordable housing, and eliminate CEQA's required environmental review? We think we have to speak up and speak up loudly to our senators and assembly members. You might have more of a problem than we do on reaching them, but we also all have the same governor. And I think he may need all of us to vote for him. And I think he needs to know that there are better solutions than what they've come up with.
In San Francisco, we have a lot of talented architects who have tackled the multifamily housing very well for a long, long time. You can solve the problem in San Francisco with your existing zoning. But why are our legislators dismantling local zoning in the name of affordability and the environment when the bills do just the opposite? We're trying to be polite here when we say if our legislators are working for the citizens, you have to question their thought process. If our legislators are working for a special interest, you understand their thought process.
With that, we are done.
And we urge you to join United Neighbors to fight these bills and join United Neighbors' vision to solve equitable housing.